On the distant world of Xyler, life was measured by one thing: the ability to create new life. The alien people believed that a woman's value was tied only to her children. If she could not give birth, she was seen as cursed, useless, and unworthy. Leora was one of those women. For years she had tried. For years she had prayed to the ancient stars. But her womb remained empty. Her body carried strength. Her mind carried wisdom. Her heart carried compassion. Yet to her people, she was nothing. The Council of Elders made the judgment. They called her name in front of the city. They stripped her of her rights. They gave her no food, no shelter, no protection. They pointed her toward the wastelands and declared she must walk until she was gone. Leora did not cry when they cast her out. Her tears had already been spent in lonely nights of shame. She only walked, her feet pressing against the cracked ground, her long silver cloak dragging through dust. Her golden eyes burned not with sorrow, but with fire. Still, deep inside, she felt the crushing weight of being unwanted. The wastelands stretched endlessly. Sharp rocks jutted out like broken teeth. The winds carried dust that cut against her skin. The nights were filled with cries of strange beasts that waited for weakness. Leora found shelter under stones. She wrapped her arms around herself and whispered, "I am more than this." But each morning was harder. Her legs trembled. Her throat burned with thirst. She thought of her people, of the city that shone with silver towers. She thought of the families with their children laughing in the gardens. That was a world she would never return to. On the seventh night, the skies broke open with storm. Purple lightning ripped through the sky. The ground shook like a living beast. Rivers of fire burst from the earth. Leora ran, her heart pounding, her cloak whipping around her. She reached the edge of a canyon. The world split wide before her. She thought it was the end. She thought the storm had come to finish what her people had begun. But then, in the heart of chaos, she saw it. A light unlike any storm. It was golden. It was pure. It descended through the clouds with power and grace. A ship, small and battered, breaking through the storm. It fell into the canyon below, smoke rising as it landed roughly against the stone. Leora froze. Her breath caught in her throat. It was not of her world, not of her people. Her kind did not build ships like that. This was something else, something foreign. The hatch opened with a hiss. A figure stepped out. He was tall, wrapped in a survival suit marked by burns and scratches, a human. She had heard the old whispers, the stories of strange beings from far-off stars. Some said humans were savages. Some said they were dreamers. To her people they were myths. Yet here one stood before her, real and breathing. The man looked around carefully, his visor cracked, his steps heavy. His body spoke of pain, but his spirit carried strength. His eyes, though hidden behind the glass, found hers. For a moment time stopped. No storm, no exile, no judgment. Only two beings staring across the broken stone. Leora took a step down the slope. Her hands shook. Her voice caught in her throat. She had not spoken to anyone since her exile. She did not know if he would understand. The man raised his hand, slow, gentle, like someone greeting a wild creature. His voice came through a broken translator, rough and metallic. "Wait. You safe?" The words struck her heart like lightning. Her people had called her worthless, cursed, broken. Yet this stranger asked her if she was safe. Her lips trembled. She whispered her name, Leora. The man tilted his head, repeating softly, Leora. Above them, thunder roared. The canyon shook. Dust rained from the cliffs. The storm demanded to claim them both. Yet in that single moment, standing across from each other, something powerful had been born. It was not trust yet, not love yet, but it was something her people could never understand. It was recognition. The human took a weak step forward, his body almost falling under the weight of exhaustion. Leora reached out her hand, her golden eyes fierce. She had been cast away as nothing, but here, now, she had a choice. The storm screamed around them, but in the center of the chaos, a broken alien woman and a wounded human soldier reached toward each other. Their worlds were different, their fates uncertain, but their meeting was no accident. It was the beginning of a story that would change both of their lives forever. The storm raged like a wild beast, lightning cutting through the sky and thunder shaking the canyon walls. Leora stood frozen, her hand halfway stretched toward the human. The winds whipped her cloak as the dust burned her eyes. Yet for the first time since her exile, she felt she was not truly alone. The human stumbled closer, his boots slipping on the rocks. He was tall, stronger than most of her kind, but his body moved with weakness, as if he had traveled far beyond his limit. His suit bore scars from fire, his breathing heavy through the broken helmet. Leora saw the deep cut across his shoulder, blood seeping into the fabric. Her instincts warned her. He was an outsider, a danger. Her people would have called him a threat, but another voice inside whispered something different. If she turned away now, he would die in the storm. If she stayed, maybe both of them would survive. The man raised a hand again, slow, cautious. "Help," he said in his broken tongue. His translator struggled, but she understood. He was asking not with authority, not with command, but with a plea. Leora nodded, pulling him toward a crack in the canyon wall. Together they stumbled into the shadows, a small hollow carved by time and storm. It was barely enough to shield them, but for the moment it was life. They sat against the stone, his breathing shallow, her body trembling from exhaustion. She looked at him carefully. His hair was dark beneath the cracked helmet, his face pale, but his eyes steady. Human eyes were strange, round, deep, and full of something she could not name. He pressed a hand to his wound, pain twisting his face. Leora hesitated, then reached into the folds of her cloak. She tore a strip of fabric and leaned close. The man flinched, but when he saw her intent, he let her wrap the wound. Her hands were gentle, her movements careful. "You save," he whispered, his voice weak but steady. The words made her chest tighten. Her people had never thanked her for anything. They had only judged, only condemned. Yet here was a stranger who bled and still found kindness for her. The storm roared outside, but inside the hollow there was silence. Leora spoke, her voice soft. "Why are you here, human?" The translator hummed, and after a pause his words came through. "Crash, ship broken. I search, colony." His sentences were broken, but his meaning was clear. He was lost, stranded. She studied him with narrowed eyes. Her people told stories of humans, dangerous wanderers of the stars. Some said they destroyed, others said they built. She did not know which kind sat beside her now, but she did know he was alone as she was. Hours passed as the storm raged on. Leora dozed against the wall, waking each time thunder cracked. The human sat silently, his gaze never far from the canyon's mouth. He seemed alert, cautious, as if danger was always near. When the storm finally calmed, the air smelled of iron and fire. Smoke drifted across the canyon floor. The human tried to stand but stumbled. Leora caught his arm, steadying him. Her strength surprised him, though her frame looked fragile. "Name," she said quietly, pointing to him. He blinked, then gave a tired smile. "Daniel." She repeated it, tasting the sound. "Dan, I-E-L." And then he said hers again, slowly, carefully, as if he wanted to remember. "Leora." Something passed between them, not quite trust, not quite friendship, but a fragile thread binding two broken lives. They made their way down toward his ship. The vessel was cracked, smoke curling from its sides. It was not large, barely enough for one traveler. But to Leora, it looked like a miracle fallen from the stars. Inside, lights flickered weakly, supplies were scattered. The air smelled of metal and burnt circuits. Daniel checked the controls, shaking his head. "Broken," he muttered. The translator struggled, but carried his meaning. For a long moment they stood there, two exiles of different worlds, both without a home, both carrying wounds deeper than flesh. Leora placed her hand on the cold metal wall. Her people had abandoned her for infertility. Daniel's people, or fate, had abandoned him here on Xyler. Yet in their brokenness they had found each other. "Stay," he said softly. His voice was uncertain, as if he feared rejection. Leora looked at him, her golden eyes shining in the dim light. She thought of her people, the cruelty, the exile. Then she thought of this man, who despite his pain had offered her a place at his side. And in that silent ship, as the storm faded outside, she gave the smallest nod. It was the beginning of something her people could never have imagined. It was the first step toward a family neither of them thought they would ever have. Days passed since the storm. Daniel's ship was broken, The engines silent, the controls cracked. He worked each morning with tired hands, pulling wires and checking screens. But nothing answered. Leora watched him quietly, sometimes offering her help, sometimes only standing by his side. Their communication was slow. His translator was old. Words came broken and rough. Yet piece by piece they learned. He taught her simple human sounds. She showed him the meaning of her alien words. Soon they could share small sentences, not perfect, but enough. Daniel learned that she was in exile. Her people had cast her away for her infertility. Leora told it without tears, but Daniel saw the pain in her eyes. He frowned, his jaw tight. "Wrong," he said firmly. "You, not broken." Those words shook her. For so long she had believed the voices of her people, believed she was cursed. Now this stranger from another world told her she was whole. She turned her face away, so he would not see the tremble in her lips. In return, Daniel told her of Earth, a blue world with vast oceans, forests, and cities filled with life. He told her he was a soldier once. But war had taken his home. Now he searched for something different, a place where he could belong. His ship had been his hope, and now it was a cage. Together they hunted for food in the wastelands, Daniel with his knife, Leora with her knowledge of plants and creatures. She showed him which roots to eat, which glowing fruits to avoid. He showed her how to build fire with sparks. At night they sat close, sharing warmth as the alien winds howled outside. But danger was never far. One evening, as the sky burned orange, they heard a cry across the canyon. A hunting beast, tall as 3 men, its skin armored with bone. Its eyes glowed red as it sniffed the air. Searching, Leora's body froze. She knew this creature, a predator her people feared. Daniel stood firm, gripping his knife. Leora pulled at his arm, whispering in fear, "No, too strong." But Daniel's eyes narrowed. He placed himself between her and the beast. The predator roared and charged. The fight was chaos. Daniel slashed. The beast struck. Its claws ripped through his sleeve, blood spraying. Yet Daniel did not fall. His movements were not of desperation but of will. With a final strike, he drove the blade deep into the beast's neck. It screamed, shook, then collapsed, the ground trembling beneath its weight. Leora rushed to him, fear and relief crashing inside her. His arm bled badly, but he forced a smile. "Safe," he whispered. Her hands shook as she tore her cloak again to wrap his wound. She looked into his eyes and saw something her people never gave her. He had fought not because she was useful, not because she was expected to. He had fought because he chose to protect her. That night, as he slept, weak from blood loss, Leora sat awake. She studied his face, the lines of struggle, the strength hidden in his stillness. She realized something. This human was different. He saw her not as broken, not as cursed, but as someone worth standing for. But even as hope stirred, fear gnawed at her heart. Her people would not ignore a ship falling from the sky. The council feared outsiders, feared change. If they discovered a human on Xylar, they would hunt him down, and if they found her with him, they would destroy her completely. The next morning Daniel woke with pain in his eyes but determination in his voice. "Fix ship," he said. His hands shook, but he kept working, wires sparking, screens flickering. He would not give up. Leora sat beside him, passing tools, holding light. She felt the bond between them grow stronger each day. As the sun set again, Daniel leaned against the ship wall, exhausted. His eyes met hers. "Thank you, Leora," he whispered. She blinked, confusion in her golden eyes. "For what?" "For not leaving," he said simply. The words pierced her heart. For years she had been left, abandoned, forgotten, and now here was someone grateful just because she stayed. Leora turned her gaze to the sky, the stars shining cold above. For the first time in her life, she wondered if fate had not cursed her but led her here, to this man, to this bond. Yet shadows of the past loomed. Beyond the silver mountains her people still lived, proud and cruel, and whispers carried by traders and winds would soon reach the council. They would learn of the human, they would come. And when they did, Leora knew she would be forced to choose between the world that rejected her and the human who gave her a new one. The days blended into each other as Daniel and Leora tried to survive. His wounds slowly healed under her care, though scars remained. She brought him herbs from the wastelands, taught him how to chew bitter roots that eased pain. In return, Daniel shared fragments of his earth knowledge, showing her small tricks to stretch fire longer, to shape tools from broken metal. Each night they sat near the dim glow of the fire inside the cracked ship. Leora spoke of the stars, of how her people worshipped them as eternal witnesses. Daniel listened, sometimes smiling, sometimes quiet. When she spoke of her exile, his fist would tighten. He could not understand a world that punished someone for not giving birth. Cruel, he would mutter, shaking his head. But outside their small refuge, the wastelands were not silent. Traders passed sometimes near the canyon, their ships low and silent like shadows. Leora's golden eyes watched them with fear. She knew the council's spies traveled with them, and soon, whispers of the fallen human ship would spread. One evening, while Daniel worked on the ship's core, Leora heard it. The distant hum of engines. She froze, her heart pounding. From the ridge above, she saw silver lights gliding across the dark sky. Not traders, not beasts, but patrol ships of the council. Her blood turned cold. Daniel noticed her fear. "What?" he asked, rising slowly. She pointed to the sky. "My people, they come." His jaw set. He looked at the broken ship, then at her. He was not ready. The ship was not ready. And yet there was no choice. If the council found him, they would kill him as a trespasser. And worse, they would punish her again for helping him. The next hours were filled with silence. They packed what little they could carry. Leora led him through secret paths carved by storms and rivers long gone. They moved quickly, avoiding the open ground, their footsteps hidden by the roar of wind. As night fell, they reached the ruins of an old outpost, stones broken, walls crumbled. It was a place her people had abandoned long ago. Now it would hide them. Daniel leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His strength had not yet fully returned. Leora sat beside him, fear burning in her chest. He looked at her, his eyes steady even in exhaustion. "We fight?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, they too many, we hide." Daniel's lips pressed thin. He was a soldier, not used to running. But he trusted her knowledge of the land. That trust weighed heavy in her heart. He could not see it. But to Leora, it meant everything. No one had ever trusted her before, not even her own family. The following day, they heard voices carried on the wind, harsh, sharp, the language of the council. Patrols searched nearby. Daniel gripped his knife, but Leora placed a hand on his arm, shaking her head. "Not yet," she whispered. They waited in silence, pressed against the stone. The patrol passed, their shadows long and cruel in the light. When the danger faded, Leora finally allowed herself to breathe. Daniel looked at her, his voice low. "They hate you, why?" Her throat tightened. She answered slowly. "Because I cannot give life to them. I am failure." Daniel's eyes burned. He reached for her hand, rough against her smooth skin. "They wrong. You save, you heal, you fight. You are life." Her heart trembled at his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. In his voice there was no pity, only truth. Her people had cast her out for what she could not do, but Daniel saw what she already was. That night she could not sleep. She lay awake, watching him rest against the ruined wall. The stars above shimmered, cold and endless. Yet in her chest there was warmth. For the first time in years, she felt she belonged. But the danger had not passed. The council would not stop. They would keep searching. They feared outsiders, feared change. And if they captured Daniel, they would make an example of him. Leora knew the truth now. She could never go back to her people. Not after this. Not after Daniel. But the choice before her grew heavier with each passing day. Would she keep running, hiding forever in the shadows of Xyler? Or would she stand against her people and fight for the one who had given her something greater than a home? He had given her the chance to feel human, even when she was not. The ruins gave them shelter, but not safety. Each day Leora felt the tension grow. The council's patrols were drawing closer. Their ships passed low, their searchlights crawling across the canyons like the eyes of predators. Daniel worked endlessly on small devices from his broken ship, his fingers steady though his body still weak. He used scraps of metal and wires, building traps and signals. Leora watched with quiet amazement. His skill with machines was unlike anything her people knew. To them, technology was sacred and untouchable. To him, It was a tool, something alive in his hands. But she also saw his frustration. Each time a circuit failed, each time the engine core refused to start, his jaw would tighten. Yet he never gave up, and Leora stayed by him, bringing food, keeping watch, holding hope. One night, as the desert wind howled through the ruins, they heard footsteps, not beasts, not traitors, but soldiers. Voices echoed in the alien tongue, cold and commanding. Leora's blood froze. She recognized the crest on their armor, the mark of the council's hunters. Daniel moved to the doorway, knife in hand. His eyes narrowed. She grabbed his arm quickly, whispering, "Too many." But the hunters were already close. Their lights swept across the ruins, beams slicing through the dark. Daniel pulled her back into the shadows, his grip firm. His whisper through the translator was rough. "Hide. Stay low." The soldiers entered the ruin, their boots striking the stone. Leora held her breath. Daniel crouched beside her, silent as shadow. They listened as the hunters searched, one of them muttering, "The human must be here. The council wants proof." Her chest tightened. If they found him, they would kill him without hesitation, and if they discovered her at his side, they would make her punishment final. The soldiers moved deeper. One stepped close, too close. His light swept across the floor. Daniel's hand tensed around his blade. Leora shook her head desperately. Fear burned in her chest, but she knew if he struck, the others would swarm. At the last moment, the soldier turned away, muttering about nothing but dust. The patrol left, their lights fading into the canyon night. Only when silence returned did Leora let out the breath she had held. Daniel lowered his blade, his shoulders heavy. "That close," he said softly. Her hands shook as she touched his arm. "They will not stop. They want you gone, and me too." Daniel's eyes met hers, firm and unyielding. "Then we stop them." The next days were different. Daniel began to prepare. He used the scraps from his ship to make simple weapons, shards of metal sharpened into blades, small charges built from broken circuits. He showed Leora how to use them, teaching her how to strike, how to move, how to defend. At first she resisted. Her people had never allowed women like her to train in such ways, but Daniel's voice was steady. "You strong, you fight." And soon she found her strength. Her hands grew firm, her movements quicker, her fear began to turn into fire. Together they planned. The ruins would be their battleground. The hunters would return, and when they did, Daniel and Leora would not run. But in the quiet between preparations, there were moments of softness. When the fire burned low, Daniel would tell her about Earth's skies, blue and endless, about rain that fell gently instead of storms that tore the land. She listened, her eyes wide, dreaming of a world she had never seen. And she told him of her childhood before the exile, of the gardens where she used to sing, of the stars she once believed were watching her with kindness. Daniel listened closely, never mocking, never turning away. In his silence, she found comfort. Yet the shadow of the council grew heavier. The hunters would return, stronger and in greater numbers. Leora knew it. Daniel knew it too. But they were no longer only two survivors hiding in the dark. They were something else now. A soldier without a home, and an exile without worth, standing together as if fate had written it long before they were born. On the night before the battle, Daniel handed her a small blade, its handle rough, its edge sharp. "For you," he said. She held it, trembling. "Why give me this?" His eyes softened. "Because you are my family now." Her heart nearly broke at those words. A family, something she thought she would never have. He gave it to her not out of pity but out of truth. In his eyes, she was not broken, she was chosen. As the moon rose above the ruins, they sat side by side. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with promise, filled with strength. And when the sound of engines echoed again in the distance, they both knew. The hunters had returned. The fight for their future was about to begin. The night air was sharp, filled with the scent of dust and stone. Leora and Daniel crouched in the shadows of the ruins, their weapons ready. Above them the silver moonlight painted the broken walls in pale glow, and from the canyon came the low hum of engines, growing louder with each breath. The hunters had returned. This time they were not few. Their patrol was larger, armored soldiers moving in formation. Their voices echoed with cruel certainty. "The human is here. The exile is with him. They will not escape this time. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He checked the charges he had built, small sparks of human engineering and alien metal. He placed them carefully among the stones, setting traps in the shadows. Leora followed his movements, her golden eyes sharp. She gripped the blade he had given her, feeling its weight. The hunters entered the ruins, their lights sweeping across broken walls. They moved like wolves, searching, confident. Leora's heart pounded, fear pressing against her ribs. Yet Daniel's steady presence beside her gave her courage. He whispered, "Wait, trust me." The first trap triggered. A sharp blast of light and fire sent 2 hunters sprawling. Their armor cracked. Their cries filled the canyon. The others roared in anger, raising their weapons. But chaos had begun. Daniel leapt from the shadows, striking fast, his knife cutting through weak points in their armor. Leora froze only for a moment. Then the fire inside her rose. She moved behind a hunter, striking with the blade. Her hands shook, but her aim was true. The soldier fell. She gasped, staring at what she had done. Daniel's voice cut through. "Good, again." The battle raged among the ruins. Stones shattered. Sparks lit the night. The hunters fought with numbers and strength. But Daniel fought with will. His every move was to protect Leora, placing himself between her and danger. His breath came hard. His wounds reopened. Yet he did not falter. Leora felt something awaken in her. For years she had been told she was weak, worthless. But here, in the fight, she was not weak. She was fierce. Her blade struck again and again. Her eyes burned with fire. She was no longer an exile hiding in shame. She was a warrior standing for her family. But the hunters were relentless, more pressed in, forcing them back against the broken wall. Daniel stumbled, blood dripping from his side. Leora caught him, pulling him close. "No, stay," she whispered desperately. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself up. "We don't run," he said firmly. Then came the leader of the hunters, clad in heavy silver armor. His voice echoed like thunder. "You betray your kind, exile. And you, human, you dare step on sacred ground. Your lives end tonight." Leora's body shook. Fear clawed at her, but Daniel stepped forward, knife in hand, his voice steady despite the blood. "No. Her life begins tonight." The leader struck. His blade of energy cut through the air. Daniel blocked, sparks flying. The clash shook the ruins. Leora cried out, rushing forward. Together they fought, Daniel striking high, Leora cutting low, their movements different but bound by trust. The leader was strong, but pride blinded him. He underestimated the bond between them. In a final desperate move, Daniel locked the leader's weapon, holding it steady even as it burned his arm. Leora saw her chance. Her blade drove into the weak gap of the armor, straight to the heart. The leader staggered, roaring in disbelief. Then he fell, the ground trembling as his body struck stone. Silence followed. The remaining hunters hesitated, their courage broken. Some fled into the night. Others dragged their wounded away. Daniel collapsed to his knees, his breath ragged. Leora dropped beside him, holding him close, her hands pressed against his wound, her voice trembling. "Stay with me, please." His eyes met hers, weak but burning with fire. "You, strong, Leora, stronger than them all." Her heart ached. She pressed her forehead to his, tears mixing with dust. For so long she had been told she was nothing. But tonight she had stood, she had fought, she had chosen. The ruins were quiet again, the hunters gone, their leader defeated. In the stillness, the bond between Leora and Daniel was no longer fragile. It was unbreakable. She held him as the night deepened, whispering into the silence, "You are my family, Daniel, and I will never let them take you from me." Above them the stars burned bright, silent witnesses to the birth of something greater than exile, greater than war, a future that neither alien nor human could have imagined. The ruins lay silent after the battle. The wind carried away the smoke. The echoes of cries faded into the canyons. Leora sat with Daniel in her arms, her hands pressed against his wounds. She whispered his name again and again, as if the sound itself could hold him in this world. Daniel's eyes opened weakly. His voice was faint but steady. "Still here," he whispered. Her tears fell freely, not of weakness but of relief. She had lost everything once. Her people, her home, her worth. She could not lose him too. You will live, she said firmly, not as hope, but as command. For days she cared for him. She gathered herbs, lit fires, kept watch while he healed. Daniel's body fought to survive, and slowly, he grew stronger again. Each time he opened his eyes, he saw her there, never leaving. The hunters did not return. Without their leader, they scattered. The council had been struck with shame, their pride wounded, their whispers carried across the land. Some called Leora a traitor, but others began to question, how could an exile defeat the council's chosen hunters? How could a human, unwanted and foreign, stand against them and live? Change had begun, even if small. But Leora did not think of them. She thought only of Daniel, of the bond they had forged. One night, as the stars glimmered above, Daniel spoke, his words soft. I cannot fix the ship fully. No going home. The words hit heavy, but his eyes met hers, filled with something greater than sorrow. But maybe this is home now. Leora's breath caught. She had always believed she was cursed, unworthy of family. Yet this man, this human, spoke as if she was enough, as if her presence made a home. Not walls, not cities, not bloodlines, but her. She reached for his hand, her golden eyes burning. Then we make a new home, together. And so they did, slowly, stone by stone. They rebuilt part of the ruins into shelter. Daniel worked with steady patience, Leora with quiet strength. Together they hunted, together they healed. They turned broken walls into a place of warmth. In time, traders who passed the canyon carried whispers of them. A human who lived with an alien exile. A woman once cast out who now walked with fire in her heart. Some feared them, some admired them. But to Leora and Daniel, the outside voices mattered little. Because they had found what neither of them thought possible, a family. One evening, as the sun painted the canyon gold, Daniel handed her a small carving, made from the scraps of his ship. It was rough, simple, but shaped like a circle of stars. He pressed it into her hand. For you, he said. She stared at it, trembling. Why? His eyes softened. Because family is not given, it is chosen, and I choose you. Her heart broke open at those words. The exile, the woman who had been punished for her infertility, now stood chosen, not for what she could give, but for who she was. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice was strong. And I choose you, Daniel. They stood together as the night came, the stars above watching in silence. The universe was vast, filled with cruelty and wonder. But here, in the canyon of exile, two souls had built something stronger than law, stronger than blood. Not a curse, not a punishment, but a future. Daniel, the human without a home. Leora, the alien without a child. Together they had created what both had lost, a family. And as the winds of Xyler whispered across the stones, their story became something more than survival. It became hope, a tale carried by the stars themselves, reminding every world that family is not born, it is made.